This could be counseling fathers. This whole thing. Time is short. They expected the Lord to return at any moment. So he's basically saying, because time is short, you need to consider how you're going to live the rest of your life. If you're a father and you have a daughter, should you allow her to get married? Now, that's one of the ways that you can look at this. Another one of the ways that this could be looked at is that he's talking to couples or men who are actually living with a woman but not involved in a conjugal relationship. It was kind of a common thing in those days. It was kind of like a trial marriage thing. They would move in together. You can put that in the example of a Jewish engagement. The bride and the groom actually lived together for a year before they got married, before they ever had any kind of a sexual relationship. It was kind of that thing to see if you can cohabitate together peacefully enough to remain together. It was common in those days. It's common in a different sense in these days that people think it's okay to move in together. In fact, some of the polls that have been taken recently say that even up to plus 50% of people who claim to be evangelical Christians set aside the things of God so far away that they've morphed into the idea that it really is okay because that's what people do today. But there again, that's the church or people that claim to be a part of the church trying to be like the world instead of being set apart. From sex because they thought that made them more holy in some way. I don't know exactly how they figured that one out, but it was their idea that we talked about a bit last week, how the Greeks considered that the body was evil. So it didn't really matter what you did with your body because it was separated completely from your spiritual side, and you could do anything that you really. I could throw the dice and say it could be any of them. I think that it probably speaks, as Paul is writing, probably to the third group. Those people who were actually married but thought that it was really making them much more holy if they abstained from any kind of a sexual relationship, even with. Stand before God and we'll know exactly what Paul was talking about. In fact, we'll probably be able to ask Paul himself what he was talking about. But anyway, this is what he goes on to say. Concerning virgins, I have no commandment from the Lord, yet I give judgment as one whom the Lord, in his mercy, has made trustworthy. In other words, God has made Paul trustworthy to give advice on this matter. I suppose, therefore, that this is good because of the present distress, that it is good for a man to remain as he is. Paul had already spoken about saying, well, it's probably best if you don't get married at all. Because he's going to go on. Are you bound to a wife? Verse 27. Do not seek to or not married. Do not seek a wife. Why? Again, because time is short. And all of these things tend to jumble up our relationship to God in this way. But even if you do marry, you have not sinned. And if a virgin marries, she has not sinned. Nevertheless, such will have trouble in the flesh, he's going to go on and explain this whole thing. Verse 29, he says, but this I say, brethren, the time is short, so that from now on even those who have wives should be as though they had none. Those who weep as though they did not weep. Those who rejoice as though they did not rejoice. Those who buy as though they did not possess. What's he saying here? If you're not married, don't seek a wife because time is too short. Concentrate on just the things of the Lord for right now. Because the time is short, you really don't have time to devote to being married. When it says, those who weep as though they did not weep. Rejoicing side of things. You don't even have time for revelry right now. All you have time for is to keep your eyes on God. And those who buy as though they did not possess. You're in the world. You live in the world. You have to be a part of that. Again, because time is short. You don't have time to devote to all those things. Sometimes when we stop and think about having a lot of possessions, we find out really quickly that those possessions begin to own us instead of the other way around, because it's so much time spent in taking care of them. Annegret. Yeah. Well, we can't look at it in the sense that God does not ordain marriage. We know that God does ordain marriage. He's the one that set that. The time is so short that you need to be concentrating on the things of the Lord, and marriage or possessions or any of these other things simply take more time than you have to give. So let's go on, because he's going to finish this thought out. Those who buy as though they did not possess, and those who use this world as not misusing it. For the form of this world is passing away. In other words, what's the right word? the modern we shouldn't be caught up in what's the latest fashion, what's the latest trend, what are people doing? Do I have to mimic what they're doing? What he's saying is that no, that's all passing away. The things that are not passing away are the things of the Lord. But I want you to be without care. He who is unmarried cares for the things of the Lord, how he may please the Lord. So that's man or woman. If they're not married, they're not concentrating on the things that it takes to make marriage work. They're concentrating more on the Lord. And remember, he's talking to, quote, Christians here, people in the church. He's not discussing this as something that's going to be an answer for worldly people unless they come to the Lord. So he who is married wife, how she might please her husband. There is a difference between a wife and a virgin. And now he goes back to that same thought about his thought about concerning virgins and the couples that were married yet abstaining from a sexual relationship. That's weird. That's not natural. So thinking that they were being oh so holy by living a celibate life while being, quote, married together, he says there's a difference between a wife and a virgin. The unmarried woman cares about the things of the Lord. Again, the man who's not married cares more about the things of the Lord. The unmarried woman cares more about the things of the Lord, that she may be holy both in body and in spirit. But she who is married cares about the things of the world and how she may please her husband. That doesn't make that wrong. Paul's not saying that that's wrong. What he's saying is you just don't have the time for that. When you're married, it's gonna take away from the time you would spend in your relationship to God. These are tough things to even wrap our minds around, because we look at the world and we look at our own relationships and we look at all those things and go, what in the world is he talking about here? How does this all work out in our lives? And this I say for your own profit, verse 35. Not that I'm not trying to say that that's going to put big restrictions on you, although it will. But you have a responsibility when you do marry to take care of your wife, the wife to take care of the husband. It's a mutual admiration society. All the things. He was a rabbi. Rabbis, it was a sin for a Jewish man not to have children. So he had to have been married at some point. What happened to his wife? We talked about that last week. We don't know. Scripturally speaking, there may I have not read anything that gave me any insight. So it's kind of like, well, she either left him because he became a Christian or she had died at this point. So, well, maybe a little. But if any man thinks he is behaving improperly toward his virgin, if she is past the flower of youth, and thus it must be, let him do what he wishes. He does not sin. Let them described in the third grouping there. Those people that were, quote, married but not indulged in a sexual relationship, thinking that that was going to make them holy somehow or holier. So, If that virgin is past the flower of her youth and she's probably not quite as desirable as a teenage bride might have been, he says it's okay. You guys go ahead and get married. It's all right. Let them marry. Nevertheless, he who stands steadfast in his heart, having no necessity, but has power over his own will, and has so determined in his heart that he will keep his virgin to us in a natural way, but it's okay. So then, he who gives her in marriage does well, but he who does not give her in marriage does better. Is this going back to talking about the fathers and the daughter thing now? That's where this whole thing's a little bit hard to unravel. I have to ask Paul about that when we get face to face. A wife is bound by law as long as her only in the Lord. Okay, Christian couple, wife married. If the husband dies, it's okay for her to remarry as long as it's in the Lord. Marry another believer. Don't ask for all the problems that would stir up if you married outside of the kingdom. But she is happier if she easier and possibly better if you stay single and stick to your guns that way too. Now, chapter 8, concerning things offered to idols, and he totally whole dissertation about sexual relationships, all of those things, the way we should live as Christians, and now goes to talking about things offered to idols. Limitations, if you will, about Christian liberty. Because as Christians, we have liberty. We are free to do things because we've been set free from the bounds of sin. So he's going to explain some things here that, again, it gets the language is a little tough and we got to unravel it a little bit. Concerning things offered to idols, what's he talking about? He's talking about food, meat specifically, that has been offered in the temples to idols, to the gods or goddesses, if you will. Generally, in those days, and generally speaking, the meat that was offered, it was probably divided into three portions. One portion was offered as a burnt offering to the small g god or to the idol. The second part of the meat was given to the one who brought the sacrifice. Okay, burnt offerings. It's the third was generally sold in the marketplace, and the marketplace wasn't how we would consider a marketplace. Consider that the temples basically had restaurants, and they sold the meat at the temple, and you could eat it there like restaurant style, or you could take it home. So the meat now that has been offered to idols, that's the whole subject of this thing. Concerning things offered to idols, we know that we all have knowledge. There's a problem with knowledge, though. Knowledge puffs up, but love edifies. And this is where he begins to turn this whole dissertation into a thing of our conscience. We all have consciences. We all have our own conscience. We all consider things a bit different. Does it not accept? We have knowledge. Knowledge puffs up, but love edifies. And if anyone thinks that he knows anything, he knows nothing yet as he ought to know. That's talking about those who have the knowledge, that, hey, we're Christians, and we know that the idols are nothing. So if meat has been offered to idols, it really doesn't matter, because that idol is just a piece of wood or a piece of stone that is nothing. Okay, yeah, it was offered by those who believed in such things. Idol. I don't want to touch it. It's stone. It's no good. Is nothing. There was the other side of that. It was offered by those who believed in such things. They said, well, we know that idols are nothing, so as far as we're concerned, it's okay to eat that meat. Doesn't matter. Okay, you got two sides. One side says, yeah, it's fine to eat a steak. Idol. I don't want to touch it. It's stone. It's no good. Is nothing. There was the other side of that. It was offered by those who believed in such things. They said, well, we know that idols are nothing, so as far as we're concerned, it's okay to eat that meat. Doesn't matter. Okay, you got two sides. Or at least one side says, yeah, it's fine to eat a steak. If anyone thinks he knows anything, he knows nothing yet as he ought to know. If I think that I'm so doggone smart that I don't want to touch it. All the best advice. It's stone. I'm probably no good. Is nothing. There was the other side of that. It was offered by those who believed in such things. They said, well, we know that idols are nothing, so as far as we're concerned, it's okay to eat that meat. That doesn't make me smart. Doesn't matter. Okay, you got two sides. Or at least one side says, yeah, it's fine to eat a steak. If anyone thinks he knows anything, he knows nothing yet as he ought to know. If I think that I'm so doggone smart that I don't want to touch it. All the best advice. It's stone. It's no good. Is nothing. There was the other side of that. It was offered by those who believed in such things. They said, well, we know that idols are nothing, so as far as we're concerned, it's okay to eat that meat. That doesn't make me smart. Doesn't that there is no other God. Okay, you got two sides. For even if there are one side says, yeah, it's fine to eat a steak. If anyone thinks he knows anything, he knows nothing yet as he ought to know. If I think that I'm so doggone smart that I don't want to touch it. It's stone. It's no good. Is nothing. There was the other side of that. It was offered by those who believed in such things. They said, well, we know that idols are nothing, so as far as we're concerned, it's okay to eat that meat. That doesn't make me smart. Doesn't that there is no other God. Okay, you got two sides. Or even if there are one side says, yeah, it's fine to eat a steak. If anyone thinks he knows anything, he knows nothing yet as he ought to know. If I think that I'm so doggone smart that I don't want to touch it. It's stone. It's no good. Is nothing. There was the other side of that. It was offered by those who believed in such things. They said, well, we know that idols are nothing, so as far as we're concerned, it's okay to eat that meat. That doesn't make me smart. Doesn't that there is no other God. Okay, you got two sides. Or even if there are one side says, yeah, it's fine to eat a steak. If anyone thinks he knows anything, he knows nothing yet as he ought to know. If I think that I'm so doggone smart that I don't want to touch it. It's stone. It's no good. Is nothing. There was the other side of that. It was offered by those who believed in such things. They said, well, we know that idols are nothing, so as far as we're concerned, it's okay to eat that meat. That doesn't make me smart. Doesn't that there is no other God. Okay, you got two sides. Or even if there are one side says, yeah, it's fine to eat a steak. If anyone thinks he knows anything, he knows nothing yet as he ought to know. If I think that I'm so doggone smart that I don't want to touch it. It's stone. It's no good. Is nothing. There was the other side of that. It was offered by those who believed in such things. They said, well, we know that idols are nothing, so as far as we're concerned, it's okay to eat that meat. That doesn't make me smart. Doesn't that there is no other God. Okay, you got two sides. Or even if there are one side says, yeah, it's fine to eat a steak. If anyone thinks he knows anything, he knows nothing yet as he ought to know. If I think that I'm so doggone smart that I don't want to touch it. It's stone. It's no good. Is nothing. There was the other side of that. It was offered by those who believed in such things. They said, well, we know that idols are nothing, so as far as we're concerned, it's okay to eat that meat. That doesn't make me smart. Doesn't that there is no other God. Okay, you got two sides. Or even if there are one side says, yeah, it's fine to eat a steak. If anyone thinks he knows anything, he knows nothing yet as he ought to know. If I think that I'm so doggone smart that I don't want to touch it. It's stone. It's no good. Is nothing. There was the other side of that was offered by those who believed in such things. He said, well, we know that idols are nothing, so as far as we're concerned, it's okay to eat that. That doesn't make any sense.
Doesn't that there is no other God.
You got two sides.
Even if there are
One side says yes, finding yourself.
If anyone thinks he knows many, he knows nothing yet, as the author many have.
If I think that I'm so doggone smart that
I don't want to touch it.
Yes,
It's
stone
bad.
that is nothing. There was the other side of that was offered by those who believed in such things. He said, well, we know that idols are nothing, so as far as we're concerned, it's okay to eat that. That doesn't make any sense.
Doesn't that there is no other God.
You got two sides.
Even if there are
One side says yes, finding yourself.
If anyone thinks he knows many, he knows nothing yet, as the author many have.
If I think that I'm so doggone smart that
I don't want to touch it.
Yes,
It's
stone
bad.
that is nothing. There was the other side of that was offered by those who believed in such things. He said, well, we know that idols are nothing, so as far as we're concerned, it's okay to eat that. That doesn't make any sense.
Doesn't that there is no other God.
You got two sides.
Even if there are
One side says yes, finding yourself.
If anyone thinks he knows many, he knows nothing yet, as the author many have.
If I think that I'm so doggone smart that
I don't want to touch it.
Yes,
It's
stone
bad.
that is nothing. There was the other side of that was offered by those who believed in such things. He said, well, we know that idols are nothing, so as far as we're concerned, it's okay to eat that. That doesn't make any sense.
Doesn't that there is no other God.
You got two sides.
Even if there are
One side says yes, finding yourself.
If anyone thinks he knows many, he knows nothing yet, as the author many have.
If I think that I'm so doggone smart that
I don't want to touch it.
Yes,
It's
stone
bad.
that is nothing. There was the other side of that was offered by those who believed in such things. He said, well, we know that idols are nothing, so as far as we're concerned, it's okay to eat that. That doesn't make any sense.
Doesn't that there is no other God.
You got two sides.
Even if there are
One side says yes, finding yourself.
If anyone thinks he knows many, he knows nothing yet, as the author many have.
If I think that I'm so doggone smart that
I don't want to touch it.
Yes,
It's
stone
bad.
that is nothing. There was the other side of that was offered by those who believed in such things. He said, well, we know that idols are nothing, so as far as we're concerned, it's okay to eat that. That doesn't make any sense.
Doesn't that there is no other God.
You got two sides.
Even if there are
One side says yes, finding yourself.
If anyone thinks he knows many, he knows nothing yet, as the author many have.
If I think that I'm so doggone smart that
I don't want to touch it.
Yes,
It's
stone
bad.
that is nothing. There was the other side of that was offered by those who believed in such things. He said, well, we know that idols are nothing, so as far as we're concerned, it's okay to eat that. That doesn't make any sense.
Doesn't that there is no other God.
You got two sides.
Even if there are
One side says yes, finding yourself.
If anyone thinks he knows many, he knows nothing yet, as the author many have.
If I think that I'm so doggone smart that
I don't want to touch it.
Yes,
It's
stone that is nothing. There was the other side of that was offered by those who believed in such things. He said, well, we know that idols are nothing, so as far as we're concerned, it's okay to eat that. That doesn't make any sense.
Doesn't that there is no other God.
You got two sides.
Even if there are
One side says yes, finding yourself.
If anyone thinks he knows many, he knows nothing yet, as the author many have.
If I think that I'm so doggone smart that
I don't want to touch it.
Yes,
It's
stone
bad.
that is nothing. There was the other side of that was offered by those who believed in such things. He said, well, we know that idols are nothing, so as far as we're concerned, it's okay to eat that. That doesn't make any sense.
Doesn't that there is no other God.
You got two sides.
Even if there are
One side says yes, finding yourself.
If anyone thinks he knows many, he knows nothing yet, as the author many have.
If I think that I'm so doggone smart that
I don't want to touch it.
Yes,
It's
stone that is nothing. There's the other side of that was offered by those who believed in such things. He said, well, we know that idols are nothing, so as far as we're concerned, it's okay to eat that. That doesn't make any sense.
Doesn't that there is no other God.
You got two sides.
Even if there are
One side says yes, finding yourself.
If anyone thinks he knows many, he knows nothing yet, as the author many have.
If I think that I'm so doggone smart that
I don't want to touch it.
Yes,
It's
stone that is nothing. There's the other side of that was offered by those who believed in such things. He said, well, we know that idols are nothing, so as far as we're concerned, it's okay to eat that. That doesn't make any sense.
that there is no other God. We've got two sides. Even if the side says yes, if anyone thinks he knows anything, he knows nothing yet, as the author of many power. If I think that I was so doggone smart, I don't want to touch it. The sound is nothing. There's the other side that is offered by those who believe. I was so hating that there is no other God. We've got two sides. Even if the side says yes, if anyone thinks he knows anything, he knows nothing yet, as the author of many power. If I think that I was so doggone smart, I don't want to touch it. The sound is nothing. There's the other side that is offered by those who believe. I was so hating that there is no other God. We've got two sides. Even if the side says yes, if anyone thinks he knows anything, he knows nothing yet, as the author of many power. If I think that I was so doggone smart, I don't want to touch it. The sound is nothing. There's the other side that is offered by those who believe. I was so hating that there is no other God. We've got two sides. Even if the side says yes, if anyone thinks he knows anything, he knows nothing yet, as the author of many power. If I think that I was so doggone smart, I don't want to touch it. The sound is nothing. There's the other side that is offered by those who believe. I was so hating that there is no other God. We've got two sides. Even if the side says yes, if anyone thinks he knows anything, he knows nothing yet, as the author of many power. If I think that I was so doggone smart, I don't want to touch it. The sound is nothing. There's the other side that is offered by those who believe. I was so hating that there is no other God. We've got two sides. Even if the side says yes, if anyone thinks he knows anything, he knows nothing yet, as the author of many power. If I think that I was so doggone smart, I don't want to touch it. The sound is nothing. There's the other side that is offered by those who believe. I was so hating that there is no other God. We've got two sides. Even if the side says yes, if anyone thinks he knows anything, he knows nothing yet, as the author of many power. If I think that I was so doggone smart, I don't want to touch it. The sound is nothing. There's the other side that is offered by those who believe. I was so hating that there is no other God. We've got two sides. Even if the side says yes, if anyone thinks he knows anything, he knows nothing yet, as the author of many power. If I think that I was so doggone smart, I don't want to touch it. The sound is nothing. There's the other side that is offered by those who believe. I was so hating that there is no other God. We've got two sides. Even if the side says yes, if anyone thinks he knows anything, he knows nothing yet, as the author of many power. If I think that I was so doggone smart, I don't want to touch it. The sound is nothing. There's the other side that is offered by those who believe. I was so hating that there is no other God. We've got two sides. Even if the side says yes, if anyone thinks he knows anything, he knows nothing yet, as the author of many power. If I think that I was so doggone smart, I don't want to touch it. The sound is nothing. There's the other side that is offered by those who believe. I was so hating that there is no other God. We've got two sides. Even if the side says It's not the hard. It's the other side of that is possible by those who believe. I'm so crazy. That there's no other Bible. That's two sides. Yes, if anyone thinks he knows, I think that I will stay down on my heart. I don't want to touch it. The second is not the hard. It's the other side of that is possible by those who believe. I'm so crazy. That there's no other Bible. That's two sides. Yes, if anyone thinks he knows, I think that I will stay down on my heart. I don't want to touch it. The second is not the hard. It's the other side of that is possible by those who believe. I'm so crazy. That there's no other Bible. That's two sides. Yes, if anyone thinks he knows, I think that I will stay down on my heart. I don't want to touch it. The second is not the hard. It's the other side of that is possible by those who believe. I'm so crazy. That there's no other Bible. That's two sides. Yes, if anyone thinks he knows, I think that I will stay down on my heart. I don't want to touch it. The second is not the hard. It's the other side of that is possible by those who believe. I'm so crazy. That there's no other Bible. That's two sides. Yes, if anyone thinks he knows, I think that I will stay down on my heart. I don't want to touch it. The second is not the hard. It's the other side of that is possible by those who believe. I'm so crazy. That there's no other Bible. That's two sides. Yes, if anyone thinks he knows, I think that I will stay down on my heart. I don't want to touch it. The second is not the hard. It's the other side of that is possible by those who believe. I'm so crazy. That there's no other Bible. That's two sides. Yes, if anyone thinks he knows, I think that I will stay down on my heart. I don't want to touch it. The second is not the hard. It's the other side of that is possible by those who believe. I'm so crazy. That there's no other Bible. That's two sides. Yes, if anyone thinks he knows, I think that I will stay down on my heart. I don't want to touch it. The second is not the hard. It's the other side of that is possible by those who believe. I'm so crazy. That there's no other Bible. That's two sides. Yes, if anyone thinks he knows, I think that I will stay down on my heart. I don't want to touch it. The second is not the hard. It's the other side of that is possible by those who believe. I'm so crazy. That there's no other Bible. That's two sides. Yes, if anyone thinks he knows, I think that I will stay down on my heart. I don't want to touch it. The second is not the hard. It's the other side of that is possible by those who believe. I'm so crazy. That there's no other Bible. That's two sides. Yes, if anyone touch it. The sound is not the hard. Is the other side of that is possible by those who believe. I'm so crazy. That there's no other Bible. We got two sides. Yes, if anyone thinks he knows, I think that I'm so doggone smart. I don't want to touch it. The sound is not the hard. Is the other side of that is possible by those who believe. I'm so crazy. That there's no other Bible. We got two sides. Yes, if anyone thinks he knows, I think that I'm so doggone smart. I don't want to touch it. The sound is not the hard. Is the other side of that is possible by those who believe. I'm so crazy. That there's no other Bible. We got two sides. Yes, if anyone thinks he knows, I think that I'm so doggone smart. I don't want to touch it. The sound is not the hard. Is the other side of that is possible by those who believe. I'm so crazy. That there's no other Bible. We got two sides. Yes, if anyone thinks he knows, I think that I'm so doggone smart. I don't want to touch it. The sound is not the hard. Is the other side of that is possible by those who believe. I'm so crazy. That there's no other Bible. We got two sides. Yes, if anyone thinks he knows, I think that I'm so doggone smart. I don't want to touch it. The sound is not the hard. Is the other side of that is possible by those who believe. I'm so crazy. That there's no other Bible. We got two sides. Yes, if anyone thinks he knows, I think that I'm so doggone smart. I don't want to touch it. The sound is not the hard. Is the other side of that is possible by those who believe. I'm so crazy. That there's no other Bible. We got two sides. Yes, if anyone thinks he knows, I think that I'm so doggone smart. I don't want to touch it. The sound is not the hard. Is the other side of that is possible by those who believe. I'm so crazy. That there's no other Bible. We got two sides. Yes, if anyone thinks he knows, I think that I'm so doggone smart. I don't want to touch it. The sound is not the hard. Is the other side of that is possible by those who believe. I'm so crazy. That there's no other Bible. We got two sides. Yes, if anyone thinks he knows, I think that I'm so doggone smart. I don't want to touch it. The sound is not the hard. Is the other side of that is possible by those who believe. I'm so crazy. That there's no other Bible. We got two sides. Yes, if anyone thinks he knows, I think that I'm so doggone smart. I don't want to touch it. The sound is not the hard. Is the other side of that is possible by those who believe. I'm so crazy. That there's no other Bible. We got two sides. other side of that is